Tipping point. What's a tipping point? You know, you go on you seesaw too much at a certain point. Right. And they say this decade, which is about 7 years to go, we don't do something by the end of this decade about our global warming, we might be in a lot more trouble than anybody else. We've just seen what happens when 7 inches of rain hits New York City in one afternoon. And that could be a lot worse in the next storm. Well, there's 2 storms merging over that. You mean storm of the century? Right. That they have decided that subways doors will drop depending on where they are, is to have shutters on doorways to keep the water out of the subway. You know, you got a cascade of water flowing down there, which happens to be when you're considering that there's a 3rd rail there, folks. And they see water coming through the walls. And now New York City is 33 feet above sea level, but they said if we keep putting it off, we keep putting it off, our bulging population, India, you look at India, they're building, one of the main frames they're importing are air conditions from Korea, Japan, and they're making their own. Why? Because you got triple-digit temperatures in cities, and people are dying of heat stroke. The planet's drying out in certain places and flooding in others. You've got those rivers of water flowing into California, drowning our farm fields. And across the Midwest, you have fire brigades near wheat fields now. A lot of wheat fields have fire trucks or tanker trucks just in case. A lot of our desert areas are burning. I mean, you're talking 100-year-old trees going poof. The National Park Service has to go in there and feed trees and brush with water. Somebody once said we should flood the land. And other times you have 2 inches of rain in Death Valley. And if you look at Death Valley, it's a lake. It's one place the burning bush party. It rained and mud. Yes, mud. Oh, yes. And well, it's humorous, but it's not. Tornado Alley is moving from west to east, further east. Things like Chicago get hit with a few inches of rain. They have to reconfigure their drainage system. The last big rain in Chicago, they had to dump sewage into Lake Michigan. Did they tell anybody that? They have to open up more flows of water down the Chicago River into the Des Plaines River. They had to drop raw sewage because all their aqueducts, not aqueducts, but deep tunnel projects got filled. Well, what they did is the water that they were processing goes through a next stage of sanitizing the water. What they did is they cleaned the water, but the next they're supposed to do is sanitize the water, so it's almost drinkable, or is drinkable. But they let that stage go because they got swelled. So some parts of a forest is going to be turned into a sewage treatment plant, which there are sewage treatment plants in the forest along the Des Plaines River. But they're basically told this thing, they have to build another one. Now there is one, I should say a sewage treatment plant for O'Hara Field. Now that's sitting in Des Plaines. Des Plaines and Mount Prospect area, which is a pretty good sized one. They do a lot of stuff. Right, so. But weathers are changing. If it rains too much in Illinois, in the springtime, you can't plant until late. If it rains too much during the summer in Illinois, your food crop drowns. Soybean, wheat, corn. They have experienced triple digit through the South. People are changing their habits, but around the world, yeah. I mean, you're talking, if it rains too much, you don't get a food crop. Now, the big question would be they got 7 inches of rain. What would happen if they got that in snow? And it stayed all winter. But of course, it's very likely it will get 7 inches of snow in 2 days. It all melts. Global warming. But it's a really serious that thing. We're at the tipping. What was the tipping point? 400 parts per million of CO2. Back in my days, in the 1970s, we were said 400 parts per million of CO2, and then we started having serious problems in this thing. Drying out of food crops, maybe a dust bowl, heavy rains, rising of oceans, melting of glaciers, the whole thing. And that was said back in the 70s when I was in school. 400 parts per million, the worst case scenario. Well, we're beyond that, aren't we? 420 parts per million? Ooh, and we're supposed to really clean all this up by 2030? Ooh, sure we will. Many countries, you could look at the percentage of how much CO2 they're putting in the atmosphere. They're going to cut back in fossil fuels. Until you get a heat wave. Triple digits across the South. Right. Triple digits in France, Germany, Greece. You saw what happens to forest fires. That's right. Thermal melting of the permafrost, where all that methane is being released. Ooh! I've always wondered this one. You see methane coming up from a lake because it's bubbling. Why don't you burn it? Yeah. Burn the methane. I guess I'm not smart.